So welcome back. In the last video, Harris gave you a quick overview about lists and how you can create them and how you can use for loops to create lists, right? Now, in this video, I want to give you more details about lists, what they are exactly, how to create them from scratch, and when should you use them. So, what is exactly a Python list? Given the data types we know so far, do you think we can store many things in the same variables? So can we store two numbers in the same variable? Can we store a number and a string in the same variable? The answer is of course no. With our current knowledge, we cannot do so, right? So we need a more complex data type that can store multiple objects or things in the same variable. And the simplest and most straightforward one is basically the Python list. So list is basically a collection of any objects, and you can see that I highlighted any in red because it's basically any. We can store strings, numbers, collection of strings and numbers and floats in the same Python list. So how to define a Python list? We do so using the square brackets, and we will see this when we go to the code. And we separate between elements using the comma, and we will see this also when we go to the code. And as you can see, lists are very powerful in storing data. However, its true power is actually revealed when we use indexing and slicing. So how to slice and index Python lists? Do you remember strings? Strings are actually a list of characters, okay? Thus, all the rules we discussed before apply here. So all the indexing and slicing rules Harris gave you before apply here in the list. So in order to slice a Python list, you need to know that it's zero based, so we start from 0, not 1, and square brackets are used to define the list, and we use comma also to separate the elements of the slicing, and we use the colon to slice the Python list. So are lists and strings the same thing? Are they basically the same thing? The answer is no. Let's look at this code. So we have here a list example 1, 2, 3, and here we want to change the element number 1, which is this one, because we said we start from 0, so we want to replace 2 with Ahmed. Okay, now we have in the third line string example Python course, and we want to change the element number 0 to be A, right? So we want to change this P to be A. So can we do so? Will this code run? The string code, the third and fourth line, will give us an error, and we will see this when we go to the code. But the other code will run just fine. This is basically because strings are immutable. So once we assign elements to the string, we cannot change these elements. On the other hand, lists are mutable, so we can change the elements of the list even after creating it. Okay, so this is the difference between mutable data types and immutable data types. So this leads us to another question: how we can categorize complex data types, and what do we mean exactly by complex data type? The complex data types are the data types that can store more than one element at the same time. So we care about two things when we talk about complex data types. We care about mutability and we care about ordering. So we categorize the data types, the complex data types, according to are they mutable or not, and can we order this data type or not. So looking at the list, we can see that the list is actually mutable, and we can see that we can order the elements in the list. So lists are mutable and they are ordered data type. Okay, so now let's go to the code and see how we can create Python lists, how we can see the mutability and ordering inside the Python lists, how we can slice, how we can index. So let's go. So here we are inside Google Colab. We saw Google Colab before, we did a little bit of exercise on it, and we know all the functionality. But I just wanted to give you also a quick overview about Google Colab, how you can use it and how you can make the most out of it, right? So we know we can create code or text using Google Colab. We can upload notebook or open notebook. We can have save a copy on Google Drive or save a copy in GitHub or whatever we want, and after finishing the code we can download all this code as either a .py Python code or .ipynb. So this is short for interactive Python notebook. Okay, and this is actually what we are running right now, interactive Python notebook, right? We can create cells, and we know everything about cells, right? We can add, we can copy and paste cells and all this stuff. But what is actually very, very powerful about this Google Colab and why you should use it in this course specifically, not just Jupyter Notebook and not just using Anaconda or anything like this, is basically because here we have very, very powerful GPU, and GPU is short for graphical processing units or graphics processing unit, and we have also a very, very powerful RAM that we can use. So when we go to the machine learning and data science part of the course, you will see that all the algorithms we are discussing are very, very computationally intensive. So it requires a lot of resources. So instead of going and buying a very powerful GPU or a very powerful computer, you can just use Google Colab and you can use it from anywhere in the world, right? So you can go here and see change runtime type, and you will see that currently the hardware accelerator is none. We don't really need to use any hardware acceleration. And here you can see we have GPU and TPU. And once we go to the machine learning part of the course, we will discuss what is the difference between GPU, TPU, and when should we use them and what does they actually do, right? So this is basically Google Colab. We can share this notebook with anyone we want. We can see all the changes we did before and everything. So let's go back to actually learning what do we mean by lists. So here we created a list. Basically, we first created this variable x and assigned 2 to this variable. We created y equal 4.2. We created Ahmed in z, and we have f as false. So this is Boolean, this is a string, and this is a float, and this is an integer. And basically, we can put all this together, right, in one place or in one variable, and we will call this variable myList. We can call it anything, but let's call it my_list. So here we run this, and then we will see that we have x, y, z, and f. In order to create a list, we said that we need to have this square brackets, right? This is in order to tell Python what exactly in this Python list, right? And in order to tell Python also the difference between the first and the second element, right? The ordering for these elements, we use this column, right? Now, this is how we create a list. If we run this, you will see that we have myList. If we printed myList, you will see that we have 2, 4.2, and then Ahmed, and then false. So all these are different basic data types, and we put them together in one advanced data type, okay? And if you print the type of myList, you will see that we have a class list. So this is the type of the data type. It's not an integer anymore. It's not a string. It's not a float. It's not anything of the basic data types. It's basically an advanced data type called list. So let's see the mutability part of the lists. So here we created a list example 1, 2, 3, just like the one that we had in the slides. And then we want to change this one, right? We want to change the element number 1, right? The second element to be Ahmed. So we want to have 1 Ahmed and then 3. So to do so, we just go to the list, right? And we go to the element in this list we want to change, which is 1, right? And we want to change it to be Ahmed. So if we do so, if we run this code and then print the new list, you will see that we have 1 Ahmed and then 3. So we changed this element. So this means that this data type, the list, is mutable, right? If we do the same in the strings, so we create a string example, and here we have Python course, right? And then we want to change this P to be A, right? We cannot do so. You will see that we have an error saying string object doesn't support item assignment. So this error basically means that we cannot change the elements of the string once they are created, okay? So we cannot do so. So this means that the strings are not mutable, right? They are immutable, while the lists on the other hand are mutable. And for the ordering part, we saw this before, but in order to emphasize on the ordering part, if we print the element number 0, you will see that we have 1. Now, if we printed the element number 3, you will see that we have an error saying index error, list index out of range. So this basically means that we have only 0, 1, and 2. So we don't have 3 in our list, right? We don't have the index number 3 in our list. We have only 0, 1, and 2. So this is the error that is printed. Now for the slicing part, we have a list created here. We have 10, 3, A, 2, and 100, right? And you will see that we have print list example, and then we open the square brackets, right? And we close them after we say 1:2, right? So you might think that what should be printed is 10 and A, right? But actually what is printed here is only 10, as you can see here. Why? Because the second number or the second index, the end index, is not included, right? So when we say 1:10, this means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, but 10 is not included. So that's why we see here that only 10 is printed, right? And we can make sure that this is actually what is happening when we see the second example. We have 1:3. So we have what is printed is actually 10 and A. 2 is not printed. So the second index, the end index, is not included. You need to understand this. And also for the negative slicing part, we said before in the strings that we can use negative slicing. So if we say -1, this means we will start from the end, right? So we will start from 100. So what if we say -3 to -1, right? So -1, -2, and -3. So we will have -3 and then -2 and -1. But this -1 will not be included. So we will only have A and 2, right? And if we do it the other way around, right? If we have -1 and then -3, then this will return an empty list, right? Because if we come here and instead of doing this, if we print 3 to 1, you will see that we have also an empty list, right? Why? Because the start index needs to be less than the end index. So we need to have 3, this should be 1, and this should be 3, right? This should be less than this one, okay? So we have here -3 is less than -1. And this is basically everything that you need to understand about the lists with the Harris exercise that you saw in the last lesson, how you can create lists with for loops. It's a very, very good exercise to understand more about lists and how we can create them. Now, in the next lesson, we will see tuples and we will see also dictionaries. So these are two advanced data types that you can use in Python And while tuples are not used that much, dictionaries are very, very useful in many applications in data science and in machine learning. So let's go.